Death had a face. I own a funeral home in my home state of Virginia. When families come to me for funeral arrangements, it's a vulnerable time. I try and make the process as easy and painless as possible. One day I was in my office and a young man came in. When people come to my office, it's never good news. The gentleman was an acquaintance and he relayed that his father had just passed. I gave my condolences and we soon got down to the nuts and bolts of how he wanted his father's service. He chose the traditional package and I told him I'd pick his dad up at the local hospital. I asked, "What happened to him, if you don't mind me asking you?" He said, "Heart attack." I again gave condolences and he went on his way. We received the body and my helper said, "Poor fella." The man's son arrived with some photos he selected of his dad that he wanted in the slideshow. I told him that they were great and said I'd make it the best slideshow he'd ever seen. There were pics of his dad as a kid, a teen, in the army, and some that were taken recently before he passed away. I loaded them onto the funeral home's computer and went to work. I then noticed something strange. In the background of the most recent photos, I noticed a man. Tall, slim, wearing all black with the type of tall stovepipe hat in all the photos. I found it odd that he was in so many pics in different places of the deceased, but I shrugged it off and proceeded. I had several photo collages to do, so I'd be busy for a few hours. I was still shook by the whole thing. I finished one and then went to another. The same thing, baby pics, some of them on a four-wheeler, out camping in a family RV, and more recent ones. I then noticed it again. The same tall, lanky man, dressed in black, in all the latest photos. It can't be. How is this possible? I compared both photos, and sure enough, it was the same identical man. I was bewildered. I asked my associate to come and look at the photos, and he saw the same thing. "Spooky," he said. I told him, "Don't you think that's a little odd?" He said, "Nah, not really," and went on his way. I then phoned my father, who had since retired, and asked him, "Hey, where are the photos from the home from way back in the day?" "Why?" he asked. "Oh, just doing some research." He quickly pointed me in the right direction, and I found them. I thumbed through many of them, and to my astonishment, I noticed photos from the turn of the century with the same man. He was there, all black, tall, stovepipe hat, and he hadn't aged at all. How was it possible? How, I wondered. I frantically phoned my father and asked him to come down to the home. He reluctantly did so. As I waited for him to arrive, I sat there wondering what I had found, wondering who it was and why he was in those pictures. My father arrived and I showed him the photos. He saw it too. He said, "Son, you captured him." I captured whom? Death. That's Death. Grim Reaper himself. He's real, kiddo. Real as rain. He then said, "Why do you think he appeared in all those pics of the people who died so near the end of their lives?" He was there to take them to their final journey. As the dates of 2 funerals approached, I pushed in 2 televisions and 2 separate funerals that were going on. As I played the photo collage, the photos of the man were gone. They disappeared. Why did it let me see it? Why did it disappear? I still had no answers. I stuck my head into the 2 rooms to check on the services to make sure everything was okay. And was. After the 2 funerals ended, I said goodbye to the last of the guests, and when the last guest left the home, I saw something. The tall man, dressed in black with that tall hat, standing across the street, staring right at me. I run out and dash across the street to catch him. To my surprise, he disappears. I yell, "Who are you? What do you want? Why are you in those pictures?" Nothing. I sit down on the bench by the funeral home and suddenly the man appears right next to me. He says, "You know who I am?" "Death," I say, with a trembling voice. He says, "If you want to call me that, I'll accept it." I said, why are you here? He said, don't worry, young fella. I'm not here for you. I said, then who are you here for? He said, well, I can't tell you that. That's the rules. But it's someone who's been sick for a long, long time. I asked him, why do you come? He said, to make it easier for them. You know, the transition. I told him I saw him in the many photographs over the years, and he said, that's odd. Haven't had a seer in many years. Seer? I said. Yeah, he replied. You have the gift. You can see us. Some can, most can't. For some reason, you can, and we don't know why. Last one that could see me was an old boy that died in Petersburg, back in the trenches, in 1864. He was hit by a shell and was dying, young boy about 15. Heard him crying for his mama. They all do, young and old. I went to him, and he saw me. Young Union boy from Massachusetts. I told him he'd be fine soon and not to worry. He went quickly after that. War's terrible, you know. Even I can't get used to it. Men do bad things to each other for the silliest reasons. Those are the hardest, but I gotta do what I gotta do, 'cause I'm not the boss. The boss, I said? Yeah, the big man that calls all the shots. I said, God? He just turned, smiled, and tipped his hat and said, good day to you, my boy, good day. I won't be seeing you, hopefully, for a long, long time. I asked a final question. I said, sir. He stopped, turned, and said, yes? How long have you been doing this? He said, since it all started, Sonny. I plopped down on the bench again, looked up to see him, and he was gone. I had spoken with death and lived to tell the tale. Doesn't seem so bad after all.